Hi, I'm Nick Law, the Global Head of Design and Creative Technology at Accenture Song. I'm going to talk to you today about the relationship between creativity and technology. It's something that a lot of people talk about now because technology is changing so quickly that relationship can be strained, can be awkward. It can also lead to a lot of arguments in our industry about what creativity is. And I just want to start off by being really clear about what I think creativity is. There's a word within a word when you say creativity, and that is create. And create is the thing that defines a creative. The thinking comes before the creation, but unless you create something, you're actually not a creative. You might be valuable in the process, you might be in operations, you might be a strategist, you might think creatively, but you're not a creative in the way that I'm talking about now. And unlike a lot of people, I don't think that everyone is creative. I think people can think creatively, but there is only a certain group of people that can stare at a blank page, overcome the fear, come up with multiple options, and actually then make it real, put it into the world. And so that's what I want to talk about. I want to talk about that part of being creative. People that have a body of work are creative people. People that have interest in thinking, they're interesting thinkers and they're valuable, but they're not creative, right? And the thing about creativity is if it is making things, then by definition, you need a medium, right? And when I talk about technology, that's what I'm talking about. I'm not talking specifically about software. I'm not talking specifically about the internet. I'm talking about anything that is a medium between what you think and what you put out in the world. So for me, a creative technology could just as easily be a stick of charcoal, could actually be the Latin alphabet and how you rearrange those things together. That's a technology. But one thing you need to understand is creative thinking is by definition something that starts with a medium. As a creative person, you can't think of a creative idea without thinking about how it's going to be put into the world. I use this example quite a lot, which is that if I have some sand in front of me and I want to draw something in that sand with my finger, even before my finger hits the sand, I've calculated what that medium can sustain. What are the limitations of that medium? What are the opportunities in that medium? And I will draw something which respects that because I've already thought about it. I won't, for example, draw something that has a lot of fine detail where I need to do cross-hatching because sand will not support that. I could do something more gestural, something big and bold because sand will support that. So all creative people think about this as they're coming up with ideas. They might be doing it in a really subconscious way. And the older the technology that they might be using might mean that the less they have to think about the opportunities and limitations of that technology. Now, I think we've lost a little bit of this relationship with technology because in the advertising industry, in the late 80s, media was separated from creative. Prior to that, agencies made their money by media commissions, but to get some economies of scale, they pulled out the media and they created separate media companies, and so we were left as creative companies with this thing that we sort of called the big idea. And the big idea, no matter how many times I've seen it, generally starts with and looks like a narrative, and more specifically, a video narrative, and more specifically than that, fits neatly into something like 30 seconds. And so when you talk about a big idea, what you're talking about is a creative idea that often is best represented in a 30-second film. That's a very important format. To this day it is, but it isn't primal in the way that we hope that a big idea is. A big idea that lives without an execution is actually a strategy. A creative idea, right, which is what I'm talking about, is dependent on media and technology. So the important thing to understand with this sort of relationship between creators and technology is that generally when new technology comes along, it's introduced to the world by technicians, right? By technologists that create the new technology. And the early versions of that technology are usually expressing an old grammar. I'll give you an example. Like when film came along, it looked a lot like theater. There wasn't this sort of language of editing and camera movement. It was a locked off camera in front of people acting. So it was using the grammar of theater through this new technology. So that the fact that you could actually put a moving image on film was the great sort of creative task, because creative people hadn't been exposed to the technology early on. It's true for photography. To be a photographer at the beginning of photography, you had to be a chemist. You needed to understand how to fix an image onto a glass plate. You didn't have time to think about the composition. You didn't have time to come up with inventive ways of composing an image, because you were thinking about the technical task. And this is true of any new technology. You find this now, for example, with a lot of expressions of what we're calling the Metaverse. It looks a lot like this old, well, it's relatively old anyway, a language of gaming, and we don't think that ultimately spatial computing will look like gaming. It's going to become something else, because at some point, creative people are going to be concerned not just about the resolution or about the sort of how accurately you're mapping a space in the world, but you'll be thinking about other creative ways of using this sort of spatial computing. So this is, I think, a very important point, and something that our industry needs to embrace. It needs to forget about this idea that you can come up with an idea without thinking about the medium. And it's best, I think, to start with thinking about the most dimensional mediums, the mediums that have interfaces in front of them, that you need to solve dimensional problems, not just simple narrative problems, but design problems. And understanding that, I think, constitutes a good use of technology now, a good creative use of technology now. So again, all creatives use technology. If you're good at TV, if you're good at 30-second spots, you understand lensing and editing and all those things that you can associate with the technology around broadcast. It's true also for print, right? So just think about that as a creative person. If you want to be fluent in a new medium, then you need to master it. You can't just come up with an idea and then hope someone that is more technically gifted than you will somehow squeeze that idea into pixels in a different world that you don't quite understand. So I think as a practitioner, it's very important that you, as a part of your creative process, you're continually getting close to new mediums, getting excited about the potential and limitations of those mediums, and working on them over and over again and developing a grammar that will best represent your creative world. Anyway, that's my little rant about creativity and technology and how they are so dependent on each other that we have to stop using the words as separately as we've been using them, right? Creativity is dependent on a medium. All mediums are technology. Get to know the technology and you'll be a good creative. And that's all I've got to say.